Hello and welcome. I'm Isuma Katauka and you are watching News X Well. Let's take a look at some of the top stories. U.S. Presidential Envoy Steve Witkoff will lead a delegation to join Gaza ceasefire and hostage talks in Egypt on Wednesday, according to Egyptian Foreign Minister Badr Abdelati. Meanwhile, Qatar's Foreign Ministry spokesman Majid Al-Ansari has criticized Israel for failing to halt operations in Gaza, as outlined in U.S. President Donald Trump's peace plan. UNICEF has reported that newborn babies in Gaza are forced to share oxygen masks due to Israel blocking the transfer of crucial incubators, worsening overcrowded hospitals in the south, with premature and underweight babies now accounting for a fifth of all newborns. According to WHO, since October 7, 2023, Israel has denied or impeded 45% of 8,000 UN humanitarian missions in Gaza, with only 14 out of 36 hospitals partially functional. A Ukrainian drone strike has killed 4 civilians on a highway in the Russia-occupied part of Kherson, according to Moscow-appointed Governor Vladimir Saldo, who has reported the attack targeted civilian vehicles. This comes amid escalating strikes, with Russia reporting it has intercepted 209 Ukrainian drones overnight in Kursk, Nizhny Novgorod, and Belgorod, according to the Russian Defense Ministry. Ukrainian Energy Minister Svetlana Hryshchuk has announced a plan to increase natural gas imports by 30% for the 2025-26 heating season. These escalating attacks raise fears of gas shortages in Ukraine, with priority given to securing imports for November-December this year. France's outgoing Prime Minister Sébastien Lecornu begins last-ditch talks to save his cabinet after resigning on Monday. Following rejection by allies and opponents, President Emmanuel Macron has tasked Lecornu with rallying cross-party support amid a fractured parliament. Tanzania police are investigating the reported abduction of former ambassador and government critic Humphrey Polepole, who went missing from his Dar es Salaam home with blood trails and broken doors, according to his family and media reports. This incident adds to growing concerns over a campaign of disappearances of opposition figures ahead of President Samia Suluhu Hassan's October 29th re-election bid, with no official investigation results published so far. Syrian President Ahmad al-Shara has reportedly met with Kurdish leader Mazloum Abdi in Aleppo, marking their first meeting since July following deadly clashes in Kurdish-majority districts. The meeting was also attended by U.S. envoys Tom Barak and Admiral Brad Cooper, focused on the stalled implementation of March agreement. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney is traveling to Washington for his second visit this year to restart stalled trade talks with U.S. President Donald Trump, with Canada the only G7 nation yet to secure a trade deal this year, as Carney now faces pressure to secure a deal. Now we start from the Middle East. U.S. Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff is heading to Egypt to join crucial talks aimed at ending the Gaza war. The White House has expressed optimism about a potential deal, with President Donald Trump noting progress in negotiations, citing Hamas's agreement on key issues. Jared Kushner, the former Middle East advisor, is also expected to join the discussions, signaling continued high-level involvement in the talks. Meanwhile, Qatar cautions that it's too early to be either optimistic or pessimistic about this outcome. Hamas has expressed its commitment to overcoming obstacles in implementing the U.S. peace plan aimed at ending the war. Meanwhile, the UN chief has called for the immediate release of hostages from the October 7, 2023 attack and for an end to the fighting in Gaza. While German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul has said that he sees willingness on all sides to implement the plan of U.S. President Donald Trump to stop the Gaza war. Let's in fact listen in to the German Foreign Minister John Wadepole's comments.
Ich bleibe zuversichtlich. Das haben mir alle Gespräche bisher gezeigt, sowohl diejenigen, die ich in Katar geführt habe, als auch in Kuwait, gestern in Tel Aviv und heute in Kairo. Alle Beteiligten haben den festen Willen, diesen Friedensplan Schritt für Schritt umzusetzen. Und wir sind jetzt bei Phase 1. Wir beide haben es ja gerade eben erwähnt. Wir haben uns auch nochmal mit der amerikanischen Seite, mit Steve Witkoff, abgestimmt. Aber die Details müssen jetzt in aller Ruhe und ehrlich gesagt auch in Vertraulichkeit miteinander besprochen.
Now for this discussion, we're joined by Adrian Calamel. He's a terrorism scholar, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Adrian, for joining us again. Good to see you. Now, looking at this news, how significant is U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and U.S.'s involvement in these peace talks and President Donald Trump pushing for the Gaza war to end?
Thank you for having me on the show, and good evening to your viewers, and good to see you again, Asuma. As far as sending Steve Witkoff goes, I think this is, let me back up. We've seen Trump put out a bunch of ultimatums to Hamas. There's been multiple ones where he's used the language that, you know, the gates of hell are going to open and whatnot. And we just haven't seen that. But what we're seeing right now is he put forward a tangible plan, a 20-point plan here that he expects Hamas to agree to. Now, if you look at that 20-point plan, especially when you get down into the later details and the fine details, what this basically amounts to is Hamas surrender, Hamas complete surrender, a safety corridor for them to get out of Gaza, to replace Gaza's infrastructure, its governance, its law and order mechanisms with something that has no association with Hamas. So, you know, Hamas is weighing in their minds right now, I would say, is, you know, do we take this? Do we regroup and pivot somewhere else? Do we go to Qatar, or do we go to, you know, Qatar and then slip back into the West Bank, or do we take this deal? Witkoff is going to be there, as well as Jared Kushner, as was mentioned. You know, they have a pretty good relationship with Qatar, and it goes along business lines. So my expectation is that they're there to hear what the Qataris have to say. Also, probably put some pressure on Qatar as well as Hamas and say, you know, Trump's serious about this. This needs to be done. It needs to be done quickly. If the demands are too far-reaching and it's shown that Hamas is not serious about these negotiations, then the war will continue and there will be a military outcome to this.
And given this Qatar's cautious stance, what do you think are the major obstacles to reaching a peace deal, and how realistic is the optimism coming from the White House?
Well, the optimism coming from the White House, I think it does have a fair deal of realism to it. Now, with Qatar, if you look at Qatar, we have to remember that they are the main financial backer for Hamas. They also, along with the Islamic Republic of Iran, the fate of the hostages may not just rest in the hands of Qatar. It may rest in the hands of the Islamic Republic. We're looking at not just Hamas versus Israel. We're looking at multiple actors against Israel. It also, Qatar, we all look at them as a benign, benevolent actor in the Middle East. The truth is they are a Muslim Brotherhood nation, and Hamas is probably their most successful proxy that they have. So do they have the ability to put pressure on Hamas? I believe they do. Will they put the pressure on Hamas to say, give up Gaza, pivot, go somewhere else, and we'll start working towards the end of trying to destroy Israel from another direction? Maybe that's the message that Qatar sends. But really, it does rest in Qatar's hands. We have to look where their senior leadership was. So.
Yes, indeed. Adrian, thank you for sharing that, and please stay with us as we come back to you. Now we stay on this topic on the 2-year anniversary of the October 7, 2023 Hamas attack. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has reaffirmed America's unwavering support for Israel. In a statement, Rubio has said that the U.S. stands firmly behind Israel's right to exist and defend itself. He further honored the victims and highlighted 2 Americans still held hostage in Gaza. Rubio has backed U.S. President Donald Trump's plan for peace in the region and condemned the global rise in antisemitism, calling it a serious threat to Jewish communities. He has urged the world to stand with Israel. Rubio has emphasized that there can be no compromise with antisemitism and strongly condemns all acts of terrorism. Now for this discussion, we go back to Adrian Calamel. He's a terrorism scholar, joins us live from New York. Thank you very much, Adrian, for staying with us. Now we all know that U.S. government is shut down, and U.S. government, especially Trump administration, is having a lot in their plate. But how does this help them in going to Middle East and being involved in these negotiations? What's their priority here?
Well, the priority's pretty simple, I think. You know, when Trump came into office, he said he was going to end the Ukraine conflict, Ukraine-Russia conflict. He was going to end the Gaza-Israel conflict. I think he wants to see a realistic end to this. It's dragged on for far too long under his administration, in his eyes, and now he believes that he's put forward a proposal that should be, I mean, there could be some tinkering with it, but with that proposal, it should be accepted, and the goal is to bring a conclusion, a day after plan, not just a conclusion, a ceasefire that puts a temporary pause in place for humanitarian aid, but puts a lasting peace and a lasting ceasefire in place. So that's the ultimate goal. That's the push. That's the urgency from the Trump administration. And also, we have to remember that we look back that Trump, he put the Islamic Republic on a 60-day time clock vis-a-vis their nuclear program. And he's put Hamas, where before it was threats and words before, now he's put them on a relatively short time clock as well. So that's why I say this trip by Witkoff and Kushner to Egypt with the Qatar delegation is probably a last gasp to see if this works, because harkening back to that 12-day conflict, the same type of thing happened. There was a meeting, nothing fruitful came out of it, and then you had the 12-day war. So that's my expectation. It's either Hamas agrees to this. If they're unserious about it, then they're going to pivot. As far as the shutdown in the U.S. government, it's not going to impact what our foreign policy does and how we act.
And how does his or U.S.'s unwavering reaffirmation of unwavering support for Israel reflect U.S.'s stance as a mediator or negotiator in this negotiation that's ongoing?
Well, the United States is going to stand by Israel on this. I think we all know this. I mean, this is a well-known fact. We're going to stand by Israel on this. We look at what they've been able to accomplish since October 7th. They've taken out numerous individuals, let's say the degrading of Hezbollah, who had $1 million, $10 million, $5 million bounties on their head for atrocities committed against American civilians and troops. They defanged and took apart Hamas as well. They have taken apart the Iranian nuclear program to a degree with the help of the United States, something that no one else had the political will to do. So the United States, in my estimation, is going to continue to back Israel and should do so, because in the United States, a lot of times we don't have the political will to do the things that are necessary, and Israel, in this case, does have the political will.
With that, I would like to thank Adrian for joining us and sharing that insight. Please stay with us as we come back to you for our next discussion as well. Now, in other developments from the Middle East, Houthis continue to target Israeli cities. Israeli defense forces have said that they neutralized fourth Houthi drone over the southernmost city of Eilat within an hour. The IDF has stated that the drones were intercepted outside the country's border, and as per the protocol, no sirens were activated. There have been strikes and counterstrikes between the Houthis and the Israeli military since the beginning of the Gaza war. The Houthis have previously targeted Eilat as well, and in response, Israel has hit Houthi facilities in Sana'a. Now we go back to our guest discussion with Adrian Calamel. He's a terrorism scholar, joins us live from New York. Thank you, Adrian, for staying with us. Now, given the Houthis' involvement in the conflict, how should the U.S. approach its policy towards this group, especially considering potential for further destabilization?
Well, this is an interesting case because what the Trump administration did was they put in place some type of agreement with the Houthis that said as long as you're not attacking, vessels and merchants on the Red Sea, then we're not going to take any action. And that was after Operation Rough Rider, that bombing campaign that I would say had relatively limited success. Now, since then, you've seen the Israelis take out several strikes, hitting key targets, individuals, high-value targets, and also, Port of Hodeidah, some of the places where they launch these attacks from, or use for their war machine. So, as this war continues, as the Houthis have been doing for over 2 years now, firing projectiles at Israel, the intelligence gets better. The intelligence about where the launching sites are, the intelligence about where the manufacturing sites are. They're not just being shipped in, they're being manufactured in Yemen now. So the intelligence gets better on these, and then Israel, we have to look at the proximity of Yemen and the proximity of the threat. Compared to the Islamic Republic, what's coming out of Lebanon, what's coming out of Gaza, the Houthi threat runs farther down the threat ladder, so to speak. But they're still a threat. So I would guess that the Israelis are continuing to gather intelligence and will carry out another operation and continue to try and degrade the Houthis' capabilities. There's a lot of factors that go into it. Also has to do with interdiction of weapon shipments. Personally, I think the U.S. should be more involved in this. We do have and have been involved in Yemen for quite some time with targeting AQAP or Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. And I think if we, along with our regional partners on the ground, such as the Southern Transitional Council, start to work together, we can come up with a more effective strategy against the Houthis. But the Trump administration needs to revisit that whole policy about just freedom of navigation. Because what they're doing is they're committing terrorist attacks on a daily basis, not to mention the terrorism that they unleashed on the Yemeni population inside the country.
With that, I would like to thank Adrian Calamel for joining us and sharing that insight as a terrorism scholar from New York. Thank you very much. Now we move on. Ukraine plans to increase its natural gas imports by approximately 30%, following a recent escalation in Russian airstrikes targeting the country's energy infrastructure. Speaking in Kyiv, Energy Minister Svetlana Hryynchuk has said that the move aims to mitigate risks of gas shortages. Let's listen in.
Ми плануємо ще на відсотків 30, якщо нам вдасться збільшити можливості імпорту. По цінам це, думаю, не так важко розрахувати, але загальної суми на зараз сказати важко. Ми з кожним партнером працюємо окремо для того, щоб розуміти, хто в якій частині зможе нам допомогти. Звичайно, в першу чергу все залежить від атак. В другу чергу все залежить від того, наскільки швидко ми можемо відновлюватися, і тільки тоді можна прогнозувати. Звичайно, з цією інтенсивністю атак, яку ми бачимо зараз, це в основному, якщо говорити про електроенергію, це прифронтові, ми вводимо тимчасові рішення. У нас зараз в Чернігові, на жаль, діють графіки погодинних відключень в Чернігівській області.
Ukraine had previously planned to import 4.6 billion cubic meters of gas for the 2025 to 2026, with around 13.2 billion cubic meters already stored in reserves. The recent attacks have also targeted regional gas facilities and power transmission networks, especially in frontline areas, leading to severe energy supply restrictions in several northern regions. Now, for this discussion, we're joined by Gilbert Doctorow. He's an international relations and Russian affairs expert, joins us live from Brussels. Thank you very much for joining us again. Good to see you. Gilbert, now in response to Ukraine's increased reliance on gas imports, how might Russia adjust its energy policies as well?
What we're talking about is the consequence of exchange of strikes by Russia and Ukraine against the energy infrastructure of the other side. In our news, Western news, they speak only about Ukraine's strikes on the Russian infrastructure. In the Russian news, they speak only about their own strikes on Ukrainian infrastructure. And it's understandable that the broad public does not have any sense of the sequence here. Who did what to whom when, and what was an action, and what was proactive and what was reactive. From my following this, I would like to call out that the latest Ukrainian remarks on what they have to import, or on how Russia has now lost its refinery capacity, 30-50% or more of Russian production, and refining has been stopped. The Russians are importing gasoline and so forth. As typically, the Ukrainians are projecting onto the Russians what is happening in Ukraine. Ukraine is importing, Russia is not importing, but anything in this regard. However, the Russians have had serious losses of refining capacity and of other energy infrastructure due to Ukrainian strikes. And some of those strikes were directed by Americans. Let's be quite open about this. It isn't discussed in media, but it is known that the most recent strikes by Ukraine on Russian gas and oil infrastructure was using HIMARS, and it was Americans who were directing those HIMARS. This is a very serious escalation. The damage was considerable. In Russian news, you hear nothing about the extensive destruction of their energy infrastructure by Ukrainian attacks. What you do hear, and this is mostly in social media, is in this region or that region, there is a shortage of fuel. Now, when this comes to a discussion, public discussion, the Russian patriots will tell you, this is the season of the harvest, the diesel fuel and other fuel is in short supply for that reason. Rubbish. It's in short supply because refineries were struck. The issue is very serious, and the Russian response was also serious. They've had in the last few days massive attacks by missiles and drones on Ukraine's energy infrastructure across the country. And the results were devastating, but not in the sense that they will put an end to the war.
And Gilbert, can you tell us more about the involvement of U.S. in these strikes that you say that it's not covered enough, or it's not covered at all in media?
It's covered in the alternative. The question of U.S. firing HIMARS was discussed yesterday on one of the leading YouTube platforms with the highly responsible people, both as panelists and as host. So I take that quite seriously. I assume that the information was coming from inside Russia by people who are who have some relationship with the panelists who are speaking in the West. Nonetheless, the fact is that Russia is, as is understandable, in a state of war, holding back a lot of information about the damage that it is experiencing, and is trumpeting its successes in blowing up everything it can on the Ukrainian side.
And do you think that after all this, U.S. can still act as a mediator? Why do you think U.S. is leaning towards Ukraine now?
The U.S.'s role as a mediator was rather peculiar from the very start. The United States effectively, if the Russians wanted to call it out, they would say what we all know, that the United States has been, is, and for the foreseeable future, even under Donald Trump, a co-belligerent with the Ukrainians against Russia. Russia has not pressed that point, because if you press it, what you have is a war with the United States, which they would prefer to avoid, and I think we would be happy if they avoided it, because it probably would be the end of civilization on Earth. For that reason, they haven't done what they have a right to do, which is name the United States as a co-belligerent. Now they're doing that, or intending to do that, if the Europeans follow the United States through the open door of supplying long-range missiles, which they will control, to attack Russian infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and otherwise. That they will control it is a blessing in a way, because if these missiles could be operated by the Ukrainians, you could be sure they would not be directed against refineries. They would be directed against Moscow, St. Petersburg, residential neighborhoods as a terrorist attack to create havoc in Russian society. But neither the Germans nor the Americans are very likely to give the Ukrainians free control of where these missiles, which they may supply, which they may deploy, will be used against Russia.
Yes,
it's not a pretty situation.
Yes, indeed, we stay in a very sensitive place now. And also, Gilbert, I'm sure you saw the news that yesterday with the confirmation that Ukraine has used domestically made missiles in recent strikes on Russian infrastructures. How does this reflect Ukraine's growing self-reliance in defense, and what impact might this have on the conflict's strategic dynamics?
If there are serious weapons being manufactured in Ukraine, they won't be manufactured for long, because intelligence will reveal to the Russians where these are, and they'll be bombed out of existence. They opened an important manufacturing center near Lvov a couple of days ago. The day after it was opened, it was obliterated by Russian bombing attack. So I don't take this question of the Ukrainians' ability or technical ability to produce serious weapons as having any determinant of the way the war goes, simply because the Russians can bomb anything they want out of existence on Ukrainian territory. That such weapons might be supplied from the West, that's another story. I do believe that the Taurus missiles that Mr. Scholz was talking about at the end of last year, before the elections, and the entry of the still more aggressive Mr. Merz into the chancellorship, I believe that they are Taurus missiles in Ukraine presently. The question is how long before the Germans allow them to be used, and I say allow, how long before the Germans themselves use them from Ukrainian bases against Russia, an act which will probably bring retribution. The Russians are unlikely to do anything about Tomahawks supplied by the United States, because that is a nuclear war to end civilization. But if the Germans try it, you can be sure that the Taurus factory will be bombed the next day.
Okay. Thank you very much, Gilbert Doctorow, for joining us and sharing that insight. Thank you. Now we move on and we stay in Europe. In Madrid, Spain, 4 people are missing and at least 10 others are injured after a building partially collapsed during construction. The incident happened near Plaza Mayor, which is a busy square in the heart of the capital. Local authorities say the site has been sealed off and nearby buildings were evacuated. Drones were deployed to assist in the search. All of the injured are construction workers. One is hospitalized with a leg fracture. Firefighters say several floors of the 5-story building collapsed inward, with no debris spilling onto the street. Emergency crews are still searching for the missing. Witnesses described hearing a loud bang and seeing thick smoke, saying that it sounded like a bomb. Let's have a look at what a witness has said.
Y yo iba a abrir la puerta de la peluquería y de repente he visto caer una cosa horrible, o sea, como una, no sé cómo explicarlo, como si fuese un tsunami que caía desde arriba hacia abajo. Ha hecho un estruendo fuertísimo, fuertísimo, y se ha llenado toda la calle de un polvo blanco que no se podía ni respirar. O sea, ha sido horroroso. Yo he cerrado rápidamente la peluquería. Ahí ya hemos salido, porque tenemos puerta por esta calle de atrás, hemos salido por aquí. Ya habían avisado a Policía Nacional, bomberos. De hecho, tenemos el marido de una clienta que es Policía Nacional y nos ha dicho no salgáis porque hay mucho peligro, quedaros ahí quietas. Y luego ya han venido los bomberos, nos han desalojado porque parece ser...
This is all we have time for. We will continue to bring you more news updates from around the world.